This is part 4 of a 5-part series. If you've heard parts 1, 2, and 3, then you'll have some sense of what I've been saying about the subject-object split, how it arises, how we keep looking outside of ourselves, how we keep looking inside of ourselves, how us as a subject feel some kind of pressure, and how this kind of explains to me why everybody gets so frantic, why all these searches end in dead ends. They're dead-end alleys eventually. It's hard to come to the end of the alley because we keep thinking, well, maybe, what if I do this? What if I do that? We just keep looking and looking and looking. And I think it's really important to acknowledge how deeply distressing this is for many, many people. You only have to look around a little bit to see how much suffering there is in the world, how cold and ruthless people can be, how greedy and aggressive people can be. Does a frantic, endless chase after more and more of anything, more and more money, more and more power, does it ever really make any sense? So us humans can really get into a lot of trouble with this. As long as your search outside or your search inside has some hope for your finding some resolution, it's going to make some sense to pursue them. And as I've mentioned, it really does. It's not that it makes sense and I just keep doing it. Even if you really understand everything that I'm saying. I mean, I understand it. I still keep looking outside, inside. I keep looking. So that's kind of where we're stuck. And that's the starting point. It's fine. We're stuck. Here we are. We're doing all these things that don't make sense. It's not news to anybody. Humans do things that don't make sense. Self-destructive things, other destructive things. We're just, you look at how much gets ignored, how much the environment gets ignored. We build cars and the cars put poisonous gases into the air. I mean, not just carbon monoxide. Cars can kill you. If you're in an enclosed space with them, they'll kill you. And yet, we drive them around as if we could just keep filling up the earth with this poisonous gases. Well, la-di-da. I need to get to work today, so I'm going to start my car and drive. I mean, of course, we do all that, and we're all stuck with each other doing all these crazy things together, just trying to get some sense of getting to the bottom of it. How do you start to think about it in a way that can actually turn things around? I've talked about the trouble of looking outside and looking inside and how that isn't really going to work. What happens with some people some of the time is that there's an attempt to abandon the subjectivity altogether, just somehow abandon my sense of self. And I thought it was worth touching on, since myself and so many people have done that as an avenue to try to deal with this. I thought it was worthwhile to touch on that problem because that doesn't work either. And that's what I want to talk about today. Hello and welcome to the 10 Crutches podcast. My name is David. I'm glad you're here. The limitations of objects, the limitations of being a subject, in other words, the limitations of being a human, can become too much. So one way to deal is for the awareness of the limitations to get abandoned. The idea is to create a whirlwind of activity so you don't have to stop and take stock of your subjective experience. This is the attempted solution of anything from just keeping busy to I'm only going to have fun, or I'm going to dedicate myself to this or that or the other goal or cause. More and more doing, more and more making money, for example, despite having hundreds of millions or even thousands of millions of dollars. Some people keep wanting more and more money, or perhaps they tell themselves they don't care about the money, but they want the power that comes from the money. Some go after more and more pleasure, sex perhaps, or more alcohol, more drugs, trying new experience after new experience. Sometimes the drive is to get away from it all, trying to find the perfect place to be stress-free, wanting to perfect the body, is another way. Getting the best vitamins, the best exercise, the best food, the best yoga classes. Committing to a political goal can keep you very busy. Fighting for what's right. That can go on for decades. If you haven't heard my disclaimers from the other episodes, there's nothing wrong with fighting for a political goal. Very, very important, in fact. Nothing wrong in and of itself with any of these activities. I'm just saying, if you want to make a check on yourself, are you willing to hear opposing viewpoints? Are you willing to actually consider that what you're chasing after might be wrong or bad or harmful in some way to some people? If you're not, then chances are you're doing it to fulfill something about your own subject-object split. The total immersion to the point of seeming to forget the self is just another way, ultimately, to hide from the effects of the subject-object split. It can only work temporarily. Some people get sometimes so desperate for a solution to this problem, and especially if it's a problem you can barely articulate, they decide to abandon subjectivity itself. Not really. I mean, you can't do it really. But these are people who just don't want to decide for themselves anymore. These are the people who join some group, for example, where someone simply tells them what to do. If it's a small, kind of quirky, peculiar religious group, it often gets called a cult, especially if there's a charismatic leader. But a more mainstream church can do the same thing. Sometimes, for some people, the army is a great solution for just having someone tell you what to do and not have to bother anymore. And all of these things, of course, are well exacerbated by social conditions that force people economically to make these choices. But basically, people sometimes want to relieve themselves of the burden of being an authentic subject who needs to live and choose in their own experience, in their own life. Some people just want to hand over the controls to some person or institution who will take the reins and allow this subject to surrender. So here, the abandonment of subjectivity can potentially be more destructive than the abandonment to subjectivity, especially if the people that are getting surrendered to encourage destruction as a path. If you find yourself in one of these attempted solutions to the subject-object split, it can lead to a very difficult cycle. The object aspect of your being, in other words, your body and your mind, can, in some circumstances, become more and more degraded, worn out, like tires on a car becoming bald. The body's not being cared for, but it's just expected to endure being ignored and somehow just continue on. Our environment itself gets the same treatment, and you can see how degraded our human environment has gotten. All because people are pursuing unworkable solutions to the subject-object split and disregarding themselves and their environment. Well, maybe not all because of, but at least part of it. And just to make clear, in case it's not obvious, there's no single mode ever pursued in purity. There's no decision to try to find an object or become some special kind of subject that's ever made 100% pure. Many of these attempted solutions are pursued concurrently and across decades. Here's a clip from the movie Wall Street, 1987, directed by Oliver Stone. Charlie Sheen's character is upset, to say the least, with Michael Douglas's character, and asks, how much is enough?
I thought that you were going to turn Blue Star around, not upside down. You fucking used me.
Well, you're walking around blind without a cane, pal. A fool and his money are lucky enough to get together in the first place.
But why do you need to wreck this company?
Because it's wreckable, all right? I took another look at it and I changed my mind.
If these people lose their jobs, they got nowhere to go. My father has worked there for 24 years. I gave him my word.
It's all about bucks, kid. The rest is conversation. Hey, buddy, you're still going to be president, all right? And when the time comes, you're going to parachute out a rich man With the money you're gonna make, your dad's never gonna have to work another day in his life.
So tell me, Gordon, when does it all end, huh? How many yachts can you water ski behind? How much is enough?
It's not a question of enough, pal. It's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses.
And of course, for someone who isn't really thinking about the bigger picture, who's caught up in the game, in other words, for most of us, most of the time, nothing will ever be enough. Given our particular way of trying to solve this problem, given that it's impossible from the start, how could anything ever be enough? The position Michael Douglas articulates is very fragile. Just one moment of real self-awareness and that whole edifice can come tumbling down. You see this when some rich person who thinks they are master of their fate loses, quote unquote, everything and jumps out of a window. That person was not ready to live anymore, with zero hope of alleviating their subject-object split. They thought they had it solved, but turns out they didn't. That person was not ready to take an honest look at their situation. In fact, many people come to the end of their lives and they're still trying this way or that way to become somebody, to prove something. They haven't seen through all this yet. They just ran out of time. If we have very short lifespans in some ways for really learning about all this. But there are some people that even if you give them 1,000 years, they're still not going to get through it. But to me, everything I'm saying is wonderful news. That's why I want to share it. I will go into more detail about how you might work this in part 5, but for right now, I want to examine the nadir of this human problem, the real low point. I just want to bring in some awareness of death. As a human, you have to realize that you are alive in a world where there is nothing really to grasp in a way that will solve this issue, where any particular temporary object you can encounter will never fulfill you completely. On top of this problem, you do become aware at some point that your subjective experience itself is limited, that it will die, that your experience will end. Now, I know there's many people that insist that there's an afterlife, that their subjective experience, perhaps they regard it as their soul, their consciousness, will continue after the life of the body is over. I'm not going to agree or disagree. I'm actually agnostic. I don't know really one way or the other. To me, this whole universe that we're in is so unlikely. It's so weird that anything to me is possible. Sure, there's an afterlife and I'm going to, my consciousness, okay, I can believe it. I'm dead and that's it. My consciousness is over. Okay, I can believe it. Sure, why not? It's all so weird anyway. All I'm saying is that if your consciousness does live on after your body dies, I do think your consciousness at some point, even if it's 4 billion years from now, I mean, at some point, what for me, some guy named David, this guy with this particular set of memories, I'm gonna just live forever past the potential collapse of the universe, like past billions of years from now. I'm still gonna be, hey, I remember 4 billion years ago when I was on Earth, did this and that. I just don't think that's likely. I just think everything seems to come and go. Everything seems to have a beginning and an end. And even if there's a soul, I think at some point that soul has to face the end. And that's hard to do. That's why we want to imagine that it goes on forever. Because we do see so much infinity around us. Why not think that we can go on forever? But it's just another way to comfort ourselves in a way that I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to comfort ourselves that way. I think we can be as comfortable as we need to be with the discomfort of having to die. So I personally am very happy to hear that there's nothing really outside me and nothing really inside me that I can change or that I can grab onto or that I need to be in some certain way in order to help me solve this deep existential problem. I don't actually need anything, really, from the outer world or my inner world. They can be how they are. I can be how I am. I find this relaxes me. It takes the pressure off. I can hopefully more and more see things for what they are. I don't need reality to be a certain way for me to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. Please visit the home of the 10 Crutches podcast at 10crutches.link. That's 10crutches.link. The book that inspired the podcast, a book I wrote called 10 Crutches for Walking in the Present, is available for free download on the website. While you are there, please take advantage of 2 ways to contact me. You can send me an email or you can make a voice recording. If you have a great question, I may be able to use it for the podcast. Also on the website, you can visit the archive to hear any published episode and see show notes for any and every show. Thanks so much for listening. And once again, thanks so much for listening. And I won't say it once again. See you next time.